Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. Today I am joined again by Hans Lander of the Myth of the 20th Century podcast. Hans, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Have I been on more times than Nightmare Vision now?
No, I don't think so. We'll have to have a competition. I mean, Nightmare has returned to the forests again. He's in seclusion. I guess too many women have been complaining about him harassing them. You know, a lot of women don't give the owl a chance. It's pretty sad, but hopefully he'll return from the forest again. But I think he's been on 4 times, so you're close. You're close. Maybe if you keep it up, you'll exceed Nightmare Vision.
Maybe I'm gonna claim his e-girl crushes if I come on more times than him.
Well, don't do that. He may be devastated. He's been doing a lot of sad posting lately, so we're. He had a really depressing post yesterday about how he has 10,000 followers, but only gets 10 likes on his post. So you got to bump up Nightmare's engagement now. But we've got a full lot of topics to talk about today. First up, we've got the Democratic National Convention. It's been a boring cringe fest so far. The convention has all the energy and excitement of a Zoom call that just won't end. And it's on Zoom, and it's all these people with poor video quality, and they're in t-shirts and they're fat, and even they're masked up inside. All of them are masked up outside. When they were doing the state delegations announcing their nomination of Biden, they're all like, they had people in the background that were all fat, masked up outside, and they're all like socially distanced. It's like, this is like the libtard fantasy right here. It's like, but did
you see the Mayor Pete? Like when Indiana came in to do their delegates, it's just him in like this futuristic looking office, like it's from Minority Report.
Yeah, it's like a warehouse, like it's an office warehouse mix, and it's like him surrounded by 3 or 4 like pudgy non-whites who are all masked up. They love that image. Even with American Samoa is now in trouble because they used military personnel in the background in uniform, and they were masked up. They really love the mask. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, you know, the whole convention has not had a lot of energy. But fortunately for them, outside of a black pastor saying that if you support a border wall, you're going to hell, and the constant harping on his systemic racism, it's been relatively moderate. They've portrayed a moderate image of Biden and the party. What do you think? Do you think I'm off base on that assumption?
It's been pretty milquetoast so far. It's not just, I don't know if I'm not bored by it. I mean, I'm not sitting around watching it, but the clips I do see of it are just fascinating. Like there's the that music rendition they did.
The Billy Porter doing an old Buffalo Springfield song and it's one of the guys, Steven Stills, who's also in this other terrible 60s band, Crosby, Stills and Nash, performing whenever you're watching a Vietnam War song, they play the song. It has some, I forget the name because it's not what the chorus is, but they're sitting around playing it, and he's like, stop, what's that sound? And it's like
some MK Ultra trigger where he's like in the vampire costume.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like so cringe because it's not performed in an auditorium. They actually did like a terribly edited music video for it with like all the words like spelled out. It's like stop, and it's like covers the entire screen, and it's like weird dancing, and everyone thought it was lame. But Billy Porter is like one of these artists that all these liberal journalos and blue check marks, whatever, he always wears these like ridiculous costumes to awards events. And they all have to be like, oh, we love him. He's like a Broadway star, musical.
What would Tariq Nasheed think of this? We have to wonder.
I think a lot of people were making jokes about this is buck breaking.
Yeah, this is buck breaking. This is buck breaking on a national scale.
There were a lot of jokes about it, but like even that like generated more attention. And journalists are trying to make these speeches more important than they are. They're like, Michelle Obama just destroyed Trump. I mean, her speech was okay, I guess. I mean, the Barack Obama speech was incredibly boring. Like I wasn't watching it. I just had it playing on the background, and I was just listening. It's like, I am not hearing anything of a note, and he needs an audience to talk to. He can't be just like sitting in it like some studio by himself just talking, because it's just like a string of platitudes that mean nothing. It's like, we got to do better. America, we had a one of the greatest evils was in our Constitution, and it's you're not. It's and people were just like, this is an incredible speech. Like Politico reporter Ryan Lizza, who's been doing a lot of. He's actually been doing a lot of like PR for the Democrats. He was the reporter who wrote the article saying that there's no factual basis for Biden's mental decline when literally a 4-year-old can tell you that Biden has severe mental decline. He wrote
his wife out to like cover for him. My husband
is not totally his wife yet. I don't think they're married. He's in a relationship with Olivia Nuzzi, who's another terrible liberal journalist. But Ryan Lizza had this tweet where it was like he was giving Obama a blowjob. It was like the most disgusting tweet I've ever seen. He's like, "This is the most incredible speech I ever." It was spellbinding, and he used all these other these other descriptions of the speech that wasn't. It's like this tingled my spine, and like all of these things, and I was like, this speech was boring. Like there was nothing good.
You have to remember, Barack Obama, for lack of a better word, hates Joe Biden, and this was kind of this has been.
I don't know if it's hate.
It's not hate. Maybe it's not hate, but it's
hate. He definitely doesn't think he is the best choice for president. I mean, he told him in 2015 to not run in 2016. I mean, that was the best. Well, I mean, the real reason why is because Hillary had accumulated all the support of the establishment behind her. Like there's going to be no challenge unless you want to go outside the establishment. And Biden had to go through the establishment to run, and he was just going to embarrass himself. And Obama's people clearly wanted somebody else in 2020 because I think they're well aware that Biden has severe mental decline, which is why
the Politico article where I guess Obama's on the record as saying something like, "Never underestimate Joe's ability to fuck things up," or something like that. Like
which is probably true. I mean, he did offer a bunch of gaffes during the Obama administration. I mean, he came out in favor of gay marriage before the administration was ready to officially declare. He said things about the swine flu that was not with the administration. He always went off the administration line to just have like senile old man moments. But he ultimately did give Obama, this buddy cop duo, which made Obama a lot more likable to, older white people who thought he was like, who's this strange guy? Like there's something off about him. But then they saw him like laughing and joking with Joe Biden, and then they were put at ease. Which Biden, I think one of the successful moments of this convention is making Biden incredibly likable and like a normal person. Like I think his wife's speech, Jill Biden's speech, and the whole Tuesday night where they talked about his family and his background was probably the best moment of the best part of the DNC, because it didn't make him out to be an extremist. It made him out to be this likable moderate who's like a Chad. He's got this good-looking family. He's got this wife, and they have some adorable story about how they met and fell in love and how she became the mom of the family from, and talked about how his wife and daughter died in the car accident, his son dying of brain cancer 5 years ago. And they went through this story, and it definitely made him, humanized him in a way where you're like, I would love to get a beer with Joe Biden. And at the same time, this is the Trump campaign is accurate with saying that this is a Trojan horse. Like you're falling for this because you're thinking you're getting this likable grandpa who like doesn't know where he is, and he understands you, and he's like you if you're a normal white middle class or working class person, and he's got this great life story, and you think, oh well, I can't be threatened by him. But really what's coming in is Kamala Harris, whose speech was even more boring than Obama's. Showed that she's a terrible orator. The only highlight was saying there is no vaccine for racism, which I pointed out I'm screwed.
Yeah, I'm screwed
I think
too.
A lot of us are screwed. I thought there was. I was trying to look for a cure over here.
Well, I think that with Kamala, you got to remember she's not really an accomplished politician. I mean, we all know the sordid history of Kamala Harris, and her entire rise to power has predominantly been through sort of behind the scenes political engineering, whether it's sleeping around or whether it's cajoling or getting favors or at one point operating a private all-black Freemasonic police force. That has kind of fallen out of the public memory.
Optics check on that.
Yeah. But, on some level, this is a woman who's never had to be a great orator because she's not a real politician. So it's not shocking that when she is asked to actually do the performative stuff that politicians are supposed to do, she just can't follow through with it because she's an incredibly kind of boring, but also, I don't know, sardonic person who really is just about power and political connections and backroom chats rather than trying to make an appeal to the average working person. Like the biggest political position she ran for was California's senator. And, being a senator in the United States from California, you don't really even have to do a lot to get that position. You just need to show up and make sure the Democratic Party supports you. So she's not like some battleground state politician, or she's not from like a blue collar kind of political background like Joe from Delaware, kind of is. She's just she's like a bureaucrat that somehow wound up in the Senate and is shockingly now, like one heartbeat away from the presidency of the United States.
Well, what she is good in is interviews and these Senate hearings. She does know how to create a sassy clapback moment, which even a lot of politicians don't. She does know how to give a rapid fire responses and grill people in a way that will get her attention. It's similar to Ted Cruz. Like Ted Cruz, I would say Ted Cruz is not a very good orator, but he knows how to appeal to his audience. But he's very good in these hearings and interviews with giving the one-liners and the questions that are going to be huge hits with his base. That's very similar with Kamala. But Kamala, I think it's the most out of all all politicians want power, but I don't think anyone is more nakedly obvious than Kamala. She is the most authoritarian politician in America, probably more so than Tom Cotton, I would say. Tom Cotton's probably the other one. Which Cotton has a lot of issues, but that does make him more based in his authoritarianism. But with Kamala, it's this is the cringe lib authoritarianism that we're gonna live under. And some people were saying oh, they're gonna restore law and order, and it's well, no, because no, they're not. Well, there's going to be less rioting and stuff because the average white liberal is no longer going to want to support this stuff after when Trump leaves. Trump's being in office does create a lot of mainstream or centrist and liberal support for this because they all hate Trump so much and they think that this is anti-Trump. So they'll be for it no matter what. And that's why there's so many of these normie libs who are out there with Antifa and BLM torching cars. Once they got in office, a lot of those normies would disappear, and the smarter people who are running these activists will be yeah, we know that now with Trump gone, these Democratic mayors are probably going to be more inclined to take us down if we're white. If they're black, there's a different story. But they're gonna a lot of this stuff will dissipate, but it won't necessarily be due to actions made by Harris and Biden. It will just be the natural state of the country that there will be less support for this stuff because a lot of this current support comes from the fact that Trump is in office. But they will, they will bring a kind of law and order. It's gonna be far harder to own a gun. It's gonna be far harder to have free speech online. It's gonna be far harder to even vote for people you want to. It's gonna be harder
to be truant to school or late to school. Maybe if you're 20 minutes late.
And they're also gonna pass a whole line of executive orders too. All of her plans were offered with, I will get this done by executive order if Congress doesn't do it. I don't think I've ever seen a politician who has actively championed the executive order as much as herself. Now, in some ways, if it was a politician, I'm not somebody who's going to say my principles, I can't do that. I would like Trump to do more stuff by executive order, but he's also having to deal with a liberal judicial system that's wholly opposed to him. So whatever he tries to do by executive order, even if it's legal and perfectly well within the law, it's going to be overturned or halted. with her, like she's probably going to do a lot of illegal stuff that's against the law. Like they can't find, like it's outrageously against the law, but the liberal court systems will be more favorable to her, and it'll be easier for her to make these things happen. So I don't think people shouldn't be saying, like, there's a few people who want to think that, especially on the right, think that everything will calm down, we'll return to 2014. Why we want to return to 2014? That's a question I want to ask, because our ideas were totally to the fringe and not on primetime cable news networks or being discussed in the White House. But some people want to return to 2014. And we are not going to return to 2014 under any circumstances. And a lot of this stuff, we'll see like fewer rioting and possibly looting, but there will be more statute of destruction. There will be less free speech. There will be more restrictions on your basic fundamental rights that you enjoy as an American citizen and as a conservative you should want to have, such as gun rights. So
and more political instability. I mean, the last few months, I think you're aware of this. There's been numerous stories to come out about this question of loyalty that Kamala supposedly needs to have to Joe's agenda. And she almost didn't get the VP slot, I guess, because there was a real question of whether or not she'd be loyal, because the implicit assumption is that Joe's going to die. Like within a year or two, definitely won't make it.
Well, I don't think die is that he's not going to be up to the capacity of being a president. Like he's going to be like, "Where am I? Who are you?" And he'll be like,
either way. I think like the issue was with Kamala. Okay, clearly there are factions of the party that absolutely hate her, and there are factions of kind of the party that absolutely love her. And so I think that if they win, and if Joe, not if, but when Joe either slumps into a catatonic state or just croaks one day in the office, there's going to be a huge amount of political instability where, first of all, Republicans are probably going to be very hostile to whatever she's trying to enact. Second of all, the Democrats internally are going to be fighting each other left and right over all these issues, and I'm sure there will be petty sniping and petty purging, but in the party, in the administration, whatever. So you could have like a year or two of just complete confusion and chaos at a political level, right when you're trying to slowly organize and think through an economic recovery. That's just the worst possible situation. That's how you get, a failed state effectively, when the economy crashes and instead of like a unified government approach to helping fix it, you have political infighting and factionalism and pettiness. That's how you get really bad political outcomes. And Kamala is insane enough, and I think has enough sociopathy to the point where she would be motivated by the chaos to do something more radical, to take more control. And I just don't see it ending well. I think you're right. There might be more law and order, but it's going to be a really terrible brand of it, to the point where you can't leave your home and, you can't do anything anymore. You have to sit and do a Zoom call for all of your stuff
while masked up too.
Right,
it's like you got to wear your mask to the bathroom as you poop. Exactly. You got to keep it on. Like the mask obsession. I mean, I understand. I'm not one of these people who are like, you shouldn't ever wear a mask at all. Like, I'm somewhat sympathetic. Like if you're in the grocery store or in like a crowded like room inside, like, and with a bunch of strangers, then yeah, you probably should wear a mask. But with liberals, they want to wear masks in their cars by themselves while they're running outside. Like just this morning, I saw a guy who's running with a mask on. And I was like, bro, come on. There's so many people who are riding bikes with masks. And it's like wearing whenever I see a person with a mask outside, I get like really angry. I'm like, take the mask off. I have to hold myself back. But they just love masks. It's a way of virtue signaling, and like it's a
sign of sophistication, right?
It's a sign of submission too. Yeah. It's like a saying like it's like saying like I trust the experts. I'm a good little boy. I will do what I say outside, and by wearing the mask at all times, even inside your home and walking outside and inside your car, it's like showing that you're like a good little servant. Like you're the teacher's pet. You're going above and beyond what you should do to be the super person. And even with, I think one of the funniest things is the Wisconsin Department of Health makes all of their employees on Zoom calls wear masks in their like bedroom,
in their home.
Yeah, and the, like as they're on a Zoom call, and it's like we have to normalize the wearing a mask, and it's like this is so lame.
Well, it's a cult. I mean, it's a cult at this point. It is a sign that you understand the like the paradigm. You know, you are committed to the cause, and it's basically just testing your loyalty. It has nothing. I don't think it has anything to do with even like we need to put on a good face for the public. It is entirely.
Yeah, it's gone beyond that because everyone already knows about the mask message. And even at the DNC, Biden, he's inside his home with his family who've all been tested, and there's no need for it. And anytime he would get up, he always has the mask in his hand, and he always wears the mask with, he'll just put it on when he's like not talking at all times. He'll just like show like put it on, and it's like a way that like you need to keep wearing this mask, you need to keep hammering home this message. And it's the same with like journalists who have like mask obbies. I hate like having a mask obby. Like they all said that like the right-wing thing to do, when the first coronavirus was first starting to get reported in January and February, there was like Antifa journalists were writing up about how the far right are putting themselves into hazmat suits, or even putting masks over their obbies. And now it's the complete opposite. It's like you are a good centrist lib or center lib blue check mark if you have a mask obby. And usually they were mad at ugly in it. Like Matt Iglesias probably has the worst obby. It looks like he's like just like a slave, like a fat slave who they're just like trying to humiliate. He's got like a purple mask, and it's like askew. His glasses are fogged up. It barely. It just looks like it just looks.
He's like incredibly stupid. Proto EF, before Aryan invasion. With like the fat face and like a ziggurat behind him, and it's just, I've always looked at Matt Iglesias as like a kind of like a clay person. You can like mold his face any which way to fit any kind of facial reconstruction you want. It's same with Brunig's husband. They have that same like dead-eyed expression, that same empty face with no features. It's like Play-Doh.
Well, now with the mask, it adds features. It hides it all. But anyone with a mask, obviously, that's bad news. And that was not the only obsessions with the Democratic Party. They all kept saying the problems of systemic racism, which is something new. I don't remember that in 2016 they would give like brief references to systemic racism, but now it was like the number one concern besides defending the post office, that they had to talk about systemic racism, and like all this is bad. And then it's all leading up to voting for an old white guy who helped create mass incarceration, which mass incarceration is good, contrary to what Jared Kushner is saying. He created these very racist laws. He gave an interview this week where he's complaining that Biden passed very racist laws that most Republicans supported or thought didn't go far enough, but that's another story. So that is one big development with the Democratic Party, is that systemic racism lies at the top of concerns. The other big concern, as I was saying before, is defending the post office, which is apparently under threat from President Trump. He's trying to steal our mail. They're spreading all these conspiracy theories that Trump is personally sending out agents and dump trucks to pick up mailboxes and steal them and take them to secret locations, or that they're repairing mail sorting machines, that this is a sign of a great conspiracy theory, that they do not want our mail to arrive. I think Joy-Ann Reid even blamed the fact that she sent out thank you notes 4 weeks ago and they haven't arrived. This is due to the Trump secret police, not delivering her thank you notes. Which if anybody who has dealt with mail in the last 6 months can tell you, the mail is running slow. The mail is not running well, and that's just due to coronavirus and people taking off. And
it has not run well like for years now. I saw some statistic that the USPS lost $70 billion over the last 10 or 11 years, something insane. It's like the Puerto Rico of government services. You get literally nothing out of it. It just costs a ton of money every year. And it's basically kept around as this novelty, right? I think people, support it because there's a nostalgia for the old American postal system, which is kind of an achievement of the United States. And at this stage, I think a lot of people outside of an election season could probably get on board with, yeah, we should probably take the post office to task. This is kind of ridiculous. But
it's turned into for liberals and Democrats, and even some, actually a surprising array of conservatives. A lot of these so-called national conservatives are also defending the post office, which is just stupid. But they're saying that this is election fraud, that what he's doing. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the roots of the Democrat complaints about the post office is very murky. What it is that Trump is fighting with the Democrats over a bill, and they have an emergency funding for the USPS. And Trump has said in interviews that he doesn't like it. And Democrats clearly want it because they want mail-in voting, which is true. And mail-in voting will benefit them, which is true. And he's like, unless they meet my demands, I'm going to hold up this funding. And that is being paired with that they're stealing mailboxes, and that they're like the Trump campaign is stealing mailboxes and all these other ridiculous conspiracy theories that are then highlighted by CNN and MSNBC. And it creates this whole impression that the USPS is under threat. And now they're sharing cringe, people are outside chaining them. Libtards are chaining themselves to mailboxes saying like, come and take it. There was some picture of a dude this is a very much a lib moment where this guy was hanging out by a mailbox, protecting it, and he was out there in cargo shorts, a mask outside, all alone next to a mailbox, with a Moscow Mitch shirt on. And this guy was just like sitting there, and I was like, come on, this is like too pathetic. They just like become
that's a Reddit moment right there. Like,
yeah, it was like a Reddit moment. Like Trump can forces them to defend every stupid thing. Like if he attacks China, they'll defend China.
That's what the mask thing was about at first, right? That's why they were pissed off. We were all having like the gas mask abbeys because it was xenophobic. It was racist
that's right,
towards Chinamen.
And now the hazmat suits, they won't let us wear anything cool. Like they don't like the N95 mask, and I think it's just because you don't look like an idiot with them. Like you actually look like you look like a right-wing secret police with it on, and they're like, oh, you can't wear that. You have to wear this like stupid like cloth.
I wear my black balaclava over my N95 every day.
Yeah, they're not going to let us wear balaclavas. They're not going to let us look good. They have to wear like this purple or pink cloth mask that makes you look like just like pathetic and a loser.
Like you're part of a
and you're just like
cult or something like that.
Yeah. So it's part of that. And like defending the post office is another sign of loyalty, where it's becoming that like this is a crucial feature of America, and without it we will die. And pretty much before Trump, like everyone complained about the post office, and they found like old tweets of like Jake Tapper and all these people who are really gung-ho about defending the post office, and they have several tweets complaining about the post office and how they didn't deliver their mail in a timely fashion. So Trump always gets them to defend whatever he's opposed to. I remember when they were briefly defending North Korea because Trump was like threatening them, and they're like, oh no, you can't threaten North Korea. They're a good at least they have a democracy or something. And they all loved Kim Jong-un's sister. They're like slay queen when she was at the 2018 Winter Olympics. So he has the unique power to make them idiots. And with this USPS thing, it's going with it, but it's all rooted in, a budget dispute in Congress, and Democrats have effectively weaponized it. And even the Postmaster General has told them that, like, we are not removing any more, mailboxes. And the mailbox removal had nothing to do with Trump or the election. It was just, cost cutting. I mean, they're losing all this money, and a lot of these mailboxes are not being used due to the development of all alternative ways of sending and receiving mail. And they're like, we're not going to do any more efforts. And then she's like, this is woefully inept response. Like you have to do more to like restore the post office. So now we need like a mailbox on every street corner, even though nobody's going to be using it. But I mean, it is like Trump is right about the mail-in, the mail-in voting problems. I mean, anytime a local news outlet or even a national news outlet tests the mechanisms for mail-in voting, it's always shown that it's like a complete failure, and the post office is in no place to actually be help with this election, especially not at the scale that they expect them. And Trump is making the solid point that like if you can protest in person, you can vote in person. And
I don't even think you can like the quintessential lib example for everything is Canada. And if I remember correctly, I believe in Canada, you have to actually show up with a form of ID to participate in an election, to participate in any kind of voting in any province of Canada. And, in Europe, it's almost entirely the same way. Like, most of the developed world doesn't even indulge that sort of nonsense. Everyone can kind of clearly see that, yeah, let's just mail in a bunch of ballots. That'll totally work. Like that's not easily manipulated. I think it's just the height of stupidity, and it's clearly just a dirty trick the Democrats are trying to play. And I think Trump was smart to just ignore it and basically say that there's nothing requiring me to sign this bill. There's nothing requiring me to give more money to the post office, which has lost untold amounts of money for decades now. And if they wanted more money to do this kind of operation, they should have saved for it. And it's not my problem. So I think that's the smart play. Just deny the funding, let the post office figure it out. If the post office fucks up, it's on them. It's not on Trump if they can't figure out how to do their job in a timely way. And, if people want their vote to be counted, they should go vote in person like Americans have been doing for a long time now. It's not like it's some newfangled problem. And I think the United States even held like in-person voting during the Civil War. So I think that we can hold in-person voting during a kind of dying down pandemic without too many problems.
As normies always say on Facebook when they see a post they agree with, well said. But I would say add one more point why libs might like the USPS is that today it was announced that Steve Bannon and others were indicted for their role in We Build the Wall fund, which if you guys remember this was like crowdfunding, building the wall, and it raised, a lot of money, millions of dollars. At the time, I didn't support it because I was like, we pay our taxpayers pay their money to the government to have these types of services. You shouldn't donate any more of your money to build a wall when it's the government's job to do this. Like, you shouldn't do it. And I was like, you shouldn't do it, but like, whatever. And today it was announced, Southern District of New York announced that they had indicted, Bannon and other people involved, and then said that they were doing sketchy stuff. I don't really know if that's true or not. We'll let the case play out. It is 100% politically motivated. Whatever they did is probably very normal for political groups. Yeah, a lot of it's sketchy. A lot of it is wasteful spending. But like, they're going to be needing to hauling in a lot of other people. And the reason why they're hauling in these people is because they're Trump supporters and it's Steve Bannon. But it was announced that Steve Bannon was arrested by USPS agents, which is like, I just imagine it's like people showing up in a mail. I mean, it's clearly not this, but it's like they show up in a mail truck. They arrive at Bannon's door. And it's like, they're like, guess what? Special delivery, asshole. And they like haul him in and they put him in the mail truck. In the back of it is like, as they go on their normal mail.
He's screaming for someone to call Raheem Kassam, like in the background. Like, someone tell him I'm not going to make this edition of War Room today.
Yeah, War Room mail truck.
Yeah, more like War Room federal prison at this point.
Yeah, I think this is like totally political motivated. I don't think what he did is like anything more wrong than the normal person. And I think this is just stupid. But it is very funny that the USPS arrested him. I think the U.S. They're accusing him of, I think, mail fraud, including this, and I guess that goes under the purview of the USPS. But it is a part of the like simulation right now that USPS would arrest Steve Bannon at a time when like the USPS is like at the top of the news story. They're like sending out their secret lib police agents to arrest
it's
national
clearly
populace. So I guess when they come for us, like it'll be somebody in a mail truck, you know, they'll be there. They'll like, here's your mail. And by the way, you're under arrest for being too based.
I think that it's clearly like a message being sent to Trump. I mean, didn't the USPS post some terrible cringe the other day? It was like,
yeah, the USPS union
fascism.
Yeah, that's right. The USPS union spread the like nothing stops us, and it was like rain, snow, blah blah blah. And then at the end, it's like fascism doesn't stop us. And then people were making these cringe artwork like with it's a mailbox, and it's like this machine kills fascists, which is another reason why Woody Guthrie should be erased from public memory. Yeah, and it's like, come on now, like the USPS is like. It's like a minority jobs program. Like finding a white mailman is like finding an endangered species. Like you could probably find like it's easier to find like endangered cougars in like the Appalachian Mountains. It's easier to find them than it is to find a white mailman. It's like, oh, it's one in the wild. Like, what is he doing there? Like, how did he get on that uniform? Like, what is he doing? If you ever go to the USPS, it's either Asians or blacks. Most of the mail services, Asian blacks. When I was growing up, there was white mailmen, but it's becoming a rarity. I haven't had too many problems with the USPS. When I was a kid, I mail ordered CDs because I was listening to CDs you can find in the nearest Best Buy. So I always used, USPS for that, to send money and to get the CDs back. I rarely had any problems, but that was, 15 years ago. It's a lot different now. I'm not going to say my old memories are why this is why we should defend it, but I know people need to be more realistic about it. Like a lot of these national conservatives are phony populists who were all voting for Evan McMullen in 2016, who are now saying like, oh, we're the real Trumpists, and they're defending it as like, this is like, we need to support the state helping out ordinary citizens. And these give working class people jobs. It's like, no, it's a minority jobs program. It's highly inefficient. Most people don't like it. And it definitely needs serious reforms. And defending the post office is just really lame. And
that's the hill you're gonna die on, guys.
Yeah, the hill you're gonna die on is like, yeah, we need mail-in voting so like they can commit widespread voter fraud and like illegal immigrants can vote who stole like a social security ID, and like they can lose like half the ballots. Like hell no, like you're not like you want to have like Shaniqua at the post office in charge of all the ballots. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, she might lose. Like she might lose some of them. Yeah, it's like she sees that these are coming from a Republican district. Those might just be mysteriously lost. So yeah, you don't want this service. There needs to be serious reforms. I think Trump is right on this, and it's a relatively humorous fight because the amount of conspiracy theories that are coming out of it are not grounded in reality. But moving on into the realm of the culture war. This is actually something started by Ben Shapiro, but there's a new hit song out. It's called WAP or WAP, and it's by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, because, I'm really hip with these young hip hop artists. WAP stands for something that is not very highly respected, but Ben Shapiro said it stands for wet ass P word. Shapiro's rant about the song led to widespread mockery and ugly journalists bragging about their WAP, which is a very disturbing thought. I think if some of these people, I tweeted out this video of Lena Dunham, who has gained an incredible amount of weight, dancing around in what she called her one-piece sex suit to the song. And it's quite a horrifying video. I don't recommend watching it. But if you are one of those curious, brave few who want to, it's on my timeline, but beware.
I'm sure there are like scenes of hell depicted in Dante's Inferno that don't quite match that video. That video was probably one of the worst things I've ever seen.
It is so, and it's like the whole thing is like referencing. It's like there's like a giant water fountain with water coming out. Like bring a bucket and a mop. It was like imagine that. Like the whole song is like imagine the smell. The music video, because like all these women, I was like, I don't want to imagine this at all. Please do not. And the song itself is just. It's like funny that they're saying it's female empowerment, but the whole song is Cardi B and this other woman demanding that this like Chad dominate them, that like he needs to tie them down and spit in their mouth and like commit like assault on their, as Shapiro would say, their wet ass P word. And this is like the song, and it's like there's like going to be millions of kids listening to it, and it's just like so absurd.
Millions
And
of
now like
TikToks. And it's just
yeah, and now like all these lame journalists like Julia Yaffe and these people who I don't want to imagine listening to this song and be like, oh, I love this. And they're like, I love this song. And it's like, you're 45 years old. You've got kids. Like, please do not talk.
Julia Yaffe, like 5 or 6 years ago, I'd be like, that's actually kind of hot.
Oh, she's not 45 because
Yeah,
she's just 35 with
she
no
looks
kids.
terrible
But
now. She's like, her eyes have sunken back. She's got like that horrible Yenta voice. 5 or 6 years ago, Julia Yaffe was definitely a bit of a temptress for the average online racist.
Yeah, that's true. But she's she's not the one with the kids. But it's like all these lame.
Yeah.
I wasn't even surprised that they just have that song blasting at the last night of the DNC. And it's like, please, come on.
Quintessential. That would have been amazing.
Well, I mean, Cardi B did give the softball interview to Biden last weekend, and it's like right after this. And yeah, it's something that they're forcing people to say that this is like the good thing. And people have like a lot of these dumb journalists who have like a limited cultural memory have brought up the Parents Music Research Center or Resource Center. I think it's Resource Center. Which the PMRC, which is an infamous thing. If you're any kind of heavy metal fan, you would be very familiar with it because they tried to ban heavy metal.
Tried to ban Marilyn Manson during Columbine.
Yeah, well, even in Marilyn Manson was even like that was another time period after the PMRC. But the PMRC at the 80s was led by Tipper Gore, wife of Al Gore, and this was liberal moms uniting with social conservatives to eliminate harmful music, which was just predominantly heavy metal. I mean, Chapo did an episode on the PMRC recently. I did not listen to it, but friends told me about it, and they expressed surprise that they didn't talk about rap at all, and that's mainly because rap at the time was very tame. It was not, Run DMC and LL Cool J was rap at that time. Is not the gangster rap hadn't been pioneered yet at the peak of the PMRC, which was in the mid 80s, and gangster rap emerged in the late 80s. So it wasn't the big focus. It was primarily heavy metal and like Cyndi Lauper and some other, and Madonna and Prince, who were the main targets of it. But and the one difference between today is that the liberal moms were agree with it. Some of it for like saying that these songs are anti-feminist, that they objectify women, and others that we, with a somewhat socially conservative message is that we don't want this smut around our kids. Even though I oppose saying that the heavy metal was smut. But now the liberal moms, as I was saying before, are dancing along to WAP. So what brought about this change in just 30 years?
Desperation that their kids don't hate them. I don't know.
That is true. There is even a moment with Claudia Conway, who's Kellyanne Conway and George Conway's kid, and she's now made herself a star because she's shared these TikTok videos, which I think any parent of a 15-year-old would be horrified, that are now shared by millions of people on the internet and journalists that you talk to on a regular basis. But she's like doing all these videos, and she's like, I'm going to change my ringtone on my mom's phone to WAP. And all these like 50-year-old people are like, good for you. Like, great. We love you. You're so awesome. Claudia and Conway is like a 15-year-old kid. And it's like Kellyanne Conway, who's ostensibly a conservative mom, can't even control her own kid. And both her and her husband are ostensibly conservatives, and they can't even control it. And this is very different from like Tipper Gore. I mean, it'd be like Tipper Gore's like teenage daughters, like forcing her, like whenever she walked around in public, carried around a boombox playing Wasp. Like that's the equivalent of what Claudia Conway is doing to her mom. And it's like, I need help like controlling my kids. And now it's like, I can't control my kids at all. And the only thing I can do is nod and try to show myself as cool and down with what they're into.
Well, you can't, I mean, we talked about this, I think first time I came on, that like there was that trend of youths going on TikTok and like doxing their parents because their parents disagreed with them about Black Lives Matter or whatever.
Oh yeah. There was like all these youthful
You
kids.
can just
and they were all doing it.
imagine. You can just imagine the histrionics. If the parents like, no, you cannot listen to the WAP song, and they're just my parents won't let me listen to this, and they're just so ignorant, and they don't let me do anything, and and by the way, this is their address, and you just imagine
there's some degree of like, I mean, Claudia Conway is 15 years old. There's like a different standard for teenager, but the real problem with the song is that like 7 and 8 year olds are going to listen to it, and it's like a certain stage. And I remember I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school and college, and I was going out and getting carts and stuff. And I remember there was one time, I think it was like 8 or 9 years ago, I was doing that. I was getting carts, and there's like a young family hopped out of their minivan, and it was like a 6-year-old and 7-year-old girl, and they were singing along to, I can't remember what exactly song. I think it was like a Kesha or Rihanna song that was incredibly sexually explicit, and they were singing along the lyrics, and I was like sitting there, I was like, what? Maybe you shouldn't want the radio to play this. And if you're like a parent, if you turn it on to the pop station, you're likely going to hear the censored version. The censored version is it's going to be more confusing to kids because they use even more like ambiguous words to cover up what they're saying in the uncensored version. But the kids are going to ask it to it, and they're going to be singing along, and that's like the real problem. And the real problem is the Nestle 15-year-old. And I can't really complain about it because like when I was a teenager, like I was listening to black and death metal. And this is like in some ways it was worse. But the difference between a lot of the metal that was being complained about in the 80s and now is that in the metal songs, this was almost portrayed as like negative attributes. It was like a part of the songs, like horror movie things, is like, oh, we're talking about the occult, but it's not like really an endorsement of the cult because it's a part of a horror movie theme. It's like we're talking about violence, but it's not in a way that we're like wanting you to commit violence. It's just a part of the song's narrative, and it fits the aggressive music. And even the sexuality of it was like celebrating a very like dominant male sexuality. I mean, all Wasp songs, I mean, their most offensive song that people hated, Animal Fuck Like the Beast, which really upset the PMRC for obvious reasons. That was a song that was about like, it's a white guy in charge, as obviously said. And now, like, the music is taking, music now, especially the music that is enjoyed by teenagers, is so female driven. As like young women are now the primary consumers of pop culture and music, that it's, it all has to appeal to them, which in the 80s, the young male teenager mattered a lot more in terms of the music industry. I mean, now male teenagers are primarily into video games, which they're trying to get women into too, to invade their last safe space.
They did that to what, like comic books and
comic books. I mean, comic books and video games are still largely male dominated spaces, and in that time, rock music was also a male dominated space. I mean, females were listening to like hair metal, but like they were definitely not listening to thrash metal and death metal.
They were listening to like Def Leppard. They weren't.
Yeah, they would listen, and even that stuff was like overwhelmingly still like a male audience. But women would listen to it, versus like no women were listening to death metal. And now, but like, and a lot of these songs that are taking it, it's like they're taking it from a female perspective of a way that it, like Ben Shapiro's criticisms of the song was not from like a traditional like moral majority or social conservative complaints that like this promotes degeneracy and sexual promiscuity, and I'm against that. It was like, well, this is not very feminist. This I don't know how this is empowering women to talk about your wet ass P word, and that's it. And that's like his primary concern. And like there's like a Federalist article that was also making the similar complaints, and it's like, they made those complaints back in the 80s too, and that was like primarily liberal moms. If you watch the famous Dee Snider was a singer for Twisted Sister. His hearing a testimony before the 1986 Senate, where he got into it with Al Gore. He showed up, of course, in a wife beater, jeans, and his long hair. He didn't wear a suit at all, and that's also part of it. And he gave this long speech, really telling about how his music doesn't objectify women in order to appeal to the feminist part of the coalition. And even at his time, the speech was also appealing to conservatives, because he's like, I work hard, I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I don't cheat on my wife, I'm in a loving relationship with, and we have a marriage and we have a kid and we're living the American dream, even though I wear, a wife beater to a Senate hearing, I'm a normal, upstanding American who lives up to the values set forth by WASP America. Not WASP the man, but WASP America, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America. And
at this point, I don't really know if there's any good modern pop music that's not in some way either geared towards women and kind of soapy and hokey, or just something that's kind of lascivious. I guess vaporwave is the most neutral new thing.
But even that's not like a pop, it's not even like some. I mean, modern rock is continuing, but modern rock is like a real, and country music as well. But even country music is now primarily designed for women. Like there's a new trend where, throughout the 2010s, there's bro country, which a lot of women liked. And it was like Florida Georgia Line and Brantley Gilbert and all these artists who are just talking about having a beer on a dirt road. And it was overwhelmingly over the top machismo that was celebrated. But now it's moving to boyfriend country, where it's all these bands who are talking about you're the love of my life, I love you, you're the best thing ever. And it's all geared primarily to women, and also female country, which which also these artists are bigger and more mainstream, like Carrie Musgraves. Taylor, even though Taylor Swift isn't really country anymore, she made the big splash. Carrie Underwood, these artists, their primary audience is women as well. And country itself is also, even though bro country, I believe, is dying out in some ways, it's primarily designed for women. Modern rock, I mean, our active rock is the term that they use for it, which it's a very D-class thing. And even I think look down on it because as a metal fan, this is we're just this sucks. It's like Breaking Benjamin and Hinder and Five Finger Death Punch. That would be the stuff. That's the only stuff that is primarily designed for white men, at least. And even rap music is now becoming more feminized with the sad emo rap, rappers talking about how their girlfriend broke up with them and they're really sad at the moment.
I think Linkin Park
Post Malone and
right, with the slit my wrists kind of rap music.
Yeah, to be it's in some ways it's like a Linkin Park rap, but it's less rock based and less aggressive. It's just more mopey. And so at women's and this is the most popular stuff. And even if you look at Post Malone, that's very female targeted music. So there's not really, for men, I think it's just because men will just consume older music, either classic rock, or if they're into niche genres, they'll listen to older punk and metal. I mean, most of the great metal records, everyone admits, were released in the 80s and the 90s. There's not, there's good new stuff, but most people are just listening to the older stuff. So they're just listening to
Eminem is now cringe. I remember listening to the real Slim Shady back
back in the good old days,
and now it's Eminem is doing rap songs where he's telling people to wear a mask. This is the guy who basically made fun of people the entire time in his songs and claimed all these celebrities gave him blowjobs, and now he wants you to be a good citizen and wear your mask. That's what the rap song's about. I mean,
there's no sense of rebelliousness anymore coming out of what's music industry, because there's no way, they're not offending the powers that be, and the WAP song is not offending the power. I mean, the powers that be love this song. I mean, Ben Shapiro is not even calling for censorship. He's just shaking his head at it. He's not even thinking about censorship in the way that the PMRC was. And
there will be no wet ass pussy in this kibbutz that we will not tolerate.
Well, people made fun of it because he was saying, my wife is a doctor, and she said if you were having to bring a bucket and a mop, you have a serious health problem. And everyone's saying so you've never experienced this. So it's he's just full of humiliating himself.
Self-own Like, buddy, you've never gotten your wife to that point before. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, but it's there's no sense of rebelliousness anymore. And this, like, the only people you're offending are people without power. You're offending the rubes, and everyone likes that. They don't have the power to, they don't have the power to do that. And even if you look at heavy metal both offended the right and the left for various different reasons. And at the same time, there was now looking back, it's like a very reactionary music because it was white men celebrating machismo and like power, and most of the lyrics were like fantasy and violence, and it was something that was not, and they didn't celebrate like being sad or moping about their life circumstances, and compare with like new metal, like now, like if you look as like WASP would be count as like a right-wing music, and especially with all this stuff. But even with the music now, like the way women are writing in music is somewhat similar to how these hair metal bands were describing sex, but it is reverting in a way that makes it appealing for, like, in a sugar-coated way where like 7-year-olds can sing along to it, and it makes it a more harmful message, because there was like an element with these metal bands where they were like saying like, this is something bad, we acknowledge this is bad, and it's a part of the allure that, but it's not like we're necessarily endorsing this. But when pop artists do it, it is like a moral endorsement that like, this is good, you should be supportive of this, like this is a moral thing to have a WAP. And I always think that like the next song, because there's been several hip hop songs that are primarily targeted to teens and preteens, even though Cardi B's like audience is not as different from someone like Ariana Grande, who's the average target demographic is like 12 or 13-year-olds. Ariana Grande had a song when that was out when she had their bombing in Manchester in 2017. It was about her getting dick side to side, and it's like all these like 11-year-olds singing along to it. So I think that like the next like step into this is like, I was listening to, as I was saying before, I was listening to all types of music with horrible lyrics, and the obvious standard for that is Cannibal Corpse, and Cannibal Corpse had all types of atrocious lyrics, like meat hook sodomy, fucked with a knife. Like, these are songs, and they're probably one of the biggest songs
these days.
Yeah, and one of the biggest songs is called "Stripped, Raped, and Strangled." And I was like, I think that now the new standard would be a female pop artist taking that from a female perspective, but loving it. Like, that's like the next step. But it's like, she doesn't die in the song. That's the difference. But
it's going to be like Rihanna asking for some like white Chad to do that to her.
Yeah, no, that is. But it's like like a consensual. It's of course like a consensual act. But that's what the type of humiliation that they want to undergo. And that's like the new standard for like pop music, is taking these like old metal songs, which were designed to like offend both the right and left, and now taking it from a female perspective where they're consensually agreeing to it. And now that's female empowerment. So it is like a celebration.
It's like corporatized transgressiveness. It's not even authentic. I mean, who are you really fighting here? The dad from Footloose isn't real. I don't know who it is you're competing against.
Yeah, the dad from Footloose isn't even around. And even in comparing his arguments to, I mean, they need Ben Shapiro to complain about this song. I mean, if Ben Shapiro did not complain about this song, I don't think it would be as popular now, but they really do need that foil. And even if you compare Ben Shapiro to the dad from Footloose, the dad from Footloose had a whole like worldview that was like why you should oppose dancing is that, and like terrible music or sinful music, is that we need music and a lifestyle that uplifts people and creates a positive, healthy lifestyle, which Ben Shapiro, all he can just say is that this isn't empowering women. And they still need the mythical Puritan to be warning against, but the mythical Puritan no longer exists. The Tipper Gore is now dancing to WAP and sharing it with her kids and having a discussion about it. There is no real like rebellious music. And I feel like if you're like a kid, like I think one of the reasons like a lot of these kids are getting more into politics is because they're normal cultural forms that they would have had in the 80s and 90s that would have built subcultures around. It would have been a way of expressing teenage rebellion and angst. That's not really around. I mean, you know, their parents are now Gen Xers, or even in some cases, like if you're a teenager, your parents are likely a Gen Xer, and that Gen Xer lived through all this. Like he may have been at like, you know, at a point where he thought heavy metal was tame. Like he went, you know, he may have been a teenager in college when Marilyn Manson was big. And that was like the last moral panic, the last time that anyone tried to, you know, censor stuff. And that also went along with video games. Video games were also, it was probably the last time the social conservatives tried to restrict stuff in the 2000s. You know, when I was growing up, I was, you know, when I was in middle school, I was like really into video games, like probably most of my listeners. And I remember that there was like a huge push to censor, to ban the Grand Theft Auto games and like Resident Evil and all these games. And now like video games itself, like video game culture is like one of the few safe havens for, even though it's of course under siege and video game journalists are trying to end this, it's one of the few safe havens for like right-wing people or just normal people who want to escape from like left-wing insanity. And pretty much everyone who's like involved in the distant right of a certain age was really into video games. And I think for most teenagers now, they just get into video games through politics, because it's the one way that they can like express any kind of rebellion or any type of dissent from the prevailing norm, because the prevailing norm wants them to like, yeah, go ahead, have your teenage rebellion phase. Yeah, like we have all these records for you and they're all safe and we all approve them because they're expressing a message that we like. You know, it's all very feminized and good. So enjoy it. And if you're like a young male, like there's not many new stuff out there for you to listen to, at least on a popular level, and the way that there was in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, there's not even really much to do anymore. I mean, skateboarding has really died. Music in general has really died. Sports is
rock is almost over. I mean, rock is just really, it's either divided into very niche genres. Like, I mean, metal's still going strong, but it's like they can't, like, unless for like a handful of bands, like pretty much everyone does it as a hobby anymore. It's no longer, and also they're much older. It's not guys in their late teens and early 20s starting these bands. It's guys in their 30s and 40s who've been playing forever, who are now like the big bands and like putting out the good music. It's rarely it's not a genre where like 19-year-olds could just form a band and then they put out an incredible record. It's a hobby genre, and that's the same with punk and a lot of other, you know, and even most indie rock as well. And indie rock is, of course, much more feminine than, you know, the big rock forms of the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s. And, you know, rock as the popular vehicle is dead. If you talk to most of these Zoomers, they're listening to rap. That's like their main form of music. I think us millennials were the last ones to experience rock as like the bread and butter genre.
Yeah, I think like the last semi-interesting rock bands that were mainstream that I listened to were Arctic Monkeys and maybe the Black Keys, although they've kind of gone a different direction. Not really a rock band anymore.
And they're very popular among women. I mean, my gym will play their music videos, and I look at it, it's like, this is entirely directed towards women.
Yeah, I mean, their earlier stuff wasn't. It was like, this is a good like blues rock kind of thing, you know. But now it's now it's pretty cringe.
Well, you have to appeal to women to make any type of money in the music industry, and that's now the food. You can't make money unless you're like one of these big bands like Iron Maiden or Metallica that like have been around forever and they have a very loyal fan base. You can't make money and you can't make a living off music unless you're primarily appealing to women. That's sad but true. We need to have a male revolt. We need to bring back hair metal. But maybe one day when we have our country again, we will have hair metal again. But moving on to the final topic, this is a reader question. Remember, you can get the power to ask questions too if you sign up for the Patreon option at Highly Respected's Patreon. This one comes from Mike. You simply ask, Scott, what do you think the Belarus situation? Well, this is another thing that we're clearly our State Department and CIA and a lot of our private corporations are interested in, because Belarus owns a lot of there's a ton of state-owned assets that people want to get their hands on, and also Lukashenko is a strong ally of Putin, and we saw what they did in Ukraine. You know, in 2014. I mean, I don't want to necessarily say like there are legitimate complaints here. I don't want to say that like every person there has been brainwashed by the CIA and the State Department. Like there are legitimate complaints about Lukashenko, about corruption, that they're not having their voice heard. Like, there's low wages. There are like serious issues. It was the same in Ukraine, where they didn't want to be, a lot of Ukrainians didn't want to be a puppet of Russia. And they thought that by overthrowing the government that they would have a better chance. But as we've seen in the last 6 years, they've just, international capital has pilfered the country. And like now they have like even more hilariously corrupt government that's allowing just billionaires to sell off like state property and stuff. So like under Zelensky, is that the new president of Ukraine? Zelensky.
Yeah, I think the last one was Poroshenko.
Zelensky is the new one. And also they still have Saakashvili, who was the Georgian premier in 2008 during the Ossetian War with Russia. This guy is now somehow deputy prime minister of Ukraine, which doesn't make much sense. And maybe he'll be deputy prime minister of Belarus too, if Lukashenko topples. So this is like a situation. I think, the people of Belarus should make the decision. I don't think we should have an involvement. I don't like what the State Department's saying about like we have our full support and we're going to take down Belarus and we're going to spread democracy there. It's like, it's not our problem. And a lot of the people probably will not like the results of what happens if they do overthrow Lukashenko and they put in like one of these liberal stooges who then allow a pilfering of their country, as happened under Boris Yeltsin in Russia in the 1990s and is happening in Ukraine now. That is to say that like Russia or Putin are like these based are like the greatest things on earth. It's just saying that we shouldn't be involved. The people should make their own decision. That's I think that's the proper position. And it also shows that our enemies are the American empire always wants, and the State Department need to be defunded. So yeah, that's my take on it. What do you think, Hans?
It's just an extension of like the insanity within American foreign policy. There's an entire class of professionals, I said this once, who've had their careers whisked out of the blood of dead Afghans. And now these people need something to do. And so they target other countries for the gay agenda, for the democracy agenda, for the free market agenda. And Belarus has been, I think, in their sights for a while, and I don't really know if it's going to work out like it did in Ukraine. Ukraine was always kind of a basket case and disorganized identity.
Well, I think also Lukashenko is probably more wanting to use Russia to come in
but Belarusian identity is just, I think, stronger than Ukrainian identity, and it doesn't have the added problem of inter-ethnic conflict. I think that Belarus is probably not going to go down, and this is just a failing attempt on behalf of weird State Department bureaucrats that have nothing to do. They have nothing to do anymore because the war in Afghanistan is dying down. Syria didn't go as planned. Ukraine's already dead, so they need something to justify their jobs. So I think they're just picking countries on a globe that they haven't yet infiltrated. So it's going to fail, and it's very cynical and weird that all these shitlibs in the United States are saying it's important to have women's rights and gay rights in some place.
And there's like entirely women's marches going through like Minsk and stuff. I mean, like they can do whatever they want. I think Belarusians also, correct me if I'm wrong, also do not have the level of animosity that ethnic Ukrainians have. I mean, and they really, in terms of World War II, they also see it as the Great Patriotic War, and they were the leaders in Soviet partisan activity. And I mean, the movie Come and See is about Belarusian villages getting torched to the ground by Nazi soldiers. But in Ukraine, there's like a much more ambiguity, or at least for ethnic Ukrainians, as they saw both sides as evil, and their nationalist organizations fought both, but at the same time collaborated a lot with the Nazi Germans. And there's like just from that historical perspective is that Ukrainians built a lot of their identity around being anti-Russian, which I don't think Belarusians have, or at least to the same extent, is that they do feel that they are more connected with the Russians than Ukrainians do, while Ukrainians view the Russians as their eternal oppressors.
Yeah, I think that that's somewhat accurate. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's our take on it. But I know that Hans has to leave in a moment, so we'll wrap it up for today. Hans, how can people find you and support you?
Well, you can find and support me by supporting Myth of the 20th Century, myth20c.wordpress.com, and the American Sun. Hopefully, listeners are familiar with both of those by now, but I'm involved with both of those projects, and I think you guys should give a little support wherever you can, and feel free to listen and read the content.
Awesome. So it's always great to have you, and we'll probably see you again in a few weeks. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me on, Scott. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome. And until next time, stay respected.